In 1492, a Genoese sailor crossed the Atlantic and claimed he'd found a new world. For 5 centuries, that crossing defined how the world understood first contact between civilizations. But on a volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific, 2,300 miles from the nearest continent, DNA tells a very different story. The people of Rapa Nui carved these statues in isolation, or so the textbooks claimed. A tiny population, cut off from the world, building monuments no one else would see. Genetic evidence now suggests that Polynesians reached South America centuries before Columbus ever set sail. And the evidence doesn't come from pottery or stone tools. It comes from the genomes of the islanders themselves. In 2020, a team from Stanford and the University of Oxford published a study that would challenge the entire timeline of transoceanic contact. They analyzed the genomes of over 800 individuals from 17 Pacific Island populations and 15 indigenous American groups. What they found was a clear signature of Native American ancestry embedded in Polynesian DNA, dating to approximately 1200 CE. That is nearly 300 years before Columbus crossed the Atlantic. The signal wasn't noise. It appeared across multiple chromosomes, in consistent track length that pointed to a single ancient admixture event. But the question was never simply whether the contact happened. The question was where it started and who made the journey. Conventional wisdom held that Polynesia was the last frontier, the final leg of human migration across the planet, ending at Rapa Nui, a dead end. But what if Rapa Nui wasn't the end of the journey? What if it was a waypoint? For centuries, the story was simple. Europeans sailed west. They found new lands. They made first contact. But Polynesian oral traditions had always told a different version. Their ancestors weren't waiting to be found. They were already navigating. The first clue wasn't genetic at all. It was a sweet potato. The sweet potato is native to South America. Yet when European explorers reached Polynesia, they found it already growing across dozens of islands, with local names predating any European contact. Radiocarbon dating placed carbonized sweet potato remains from the Cook Islands to around 1000 CE. That is 500 years before any European ship entered the Pacific. In 2013, researchers at the University of Auckland used genetic analysis on ancient sweet potato specimens and confirmed their South American origin. The plant's genetics matched varieties from the Ecuadorian and Colombian coast, suggesting a direct transfer across the Pacific, not accidental drift on ocean currents. Critics argued that ocean currents alone could have carried the sweet potato westward. Seeds drift, fruits float. Nature doesn't need a sailor, but the varieties found in Polynesia weren't wild. They were cultivated strains, deliberately selected for food production. Plants don't domesticate themselves mid-ocean, but a plant can travel without people. Seeds float. Fruits drift. The sweet potato alone couldn't settle the debate. What researchers needed was human DNA. And in 2014, they got it. A team led by Eric Thorsby at the University of Oslo analyzed blood samples from 27 Rapa Nui Islanders with documented genealogies stretching back before European arrival. The results showed specific HLA alleles, immune system gene variants, that were unmistakably Native American in origin, and they appeared in individuals whose family lines predated European contact with the island. The implication was staggering. Someone had crossed the Pacific and mixed with the Polynesian population of Rapa Nui hundreds of years before any European knew the island existed. But skeptics pushed back. HLA genes are under strong selection pressure. Maybe the resemblance was convergent evolution, not actual contact. That is where the 2020 Nature study changed everything. Alexander Ioannidis and his team at Stanford didn't rely on a handful of immune genes. They scanned entire genomes across 807 individuals, from islands spanning the full breadth of the Pacific. They found Native American ancestry tracts embedded in the genomes of people from multiple islands, not just Rapa Nui, The signal appeared in the Marquesas, Palliser, and Mangareva populations as well, and the statistical modeling pointed to a single contact event around 1150 to 1230 CE, most likely on the coast of present-day Colombia. The closest genetic match wasn't to Andean populations or Amazonian groups. It was to the Zenu people of northern Colombia, a coastal civilization with a long maritime tradition. The Zenu were goldsmiths, traders, and canal builders who controlled a network of waterways along the Caribbean and Pacific coasts. They weren't isolated, they were connected. But here is the twist. For decades, the debate about Pacific contact ran in the wrong direction entirely. In 1947, Norwegian explorer Thor Heyerdahl sailed a balsa wood raft called the Kon-Tiki from Peru to Polynesia. His theory was bold. South Americans had colonized the Pacific. The voyage captured global attention, but Heyerdahl's hypothesis assumed the flow of people went from east to west, from America to Polynesia. DNA proved the opposite. The genetic evidence is consistent with Polynesians traveling to South America, not South Americans traveling to Polynesia. The admixture tracks in Polynesian genomes are short, consistent with a single ancient contact event. If South Americans had actually colonized the islands, the tracks would be much longer and more widespread, and the track lengths told another story. The longest Native American segments appeared not on Rapa Nui but in the Marquesas Islands, over 2,000 miles to the northwest. That pointed to a startling possibility. The initial contact between Polynesians and South Americans didn't happen on Rapa Nui at all. The computational models suggested the admixture originated in the southern Marquesas, possibly on the island of Fatu Hiva, and then spread as Polynesians continued their expansion eastward to Rapa Nui and beyond. If Polynesian voyagers made landfall on the Colombian coast around 1150 CE, they would have encountered a thriving maritime culture with its own seafaring knowledge. The Zenu maintained engineered canal systems spanning hundreds of square miles. They traded across coastal and riverine networks. They had the infrastructure for sustained contact with ocean travelers. But the DNA also raises questions it can't answer. The admixture tracks are consistent with a brief encounter, not a sustained relationship. Was it a trade voyage, a kidnapping, a shipwreck? DNA records the mixing. It doesn't record the conversation. A haplogroup doesn't carry a passport. A chromosome tract doesn't tell you whether the people who shared it came in peace or fled in fear. The DNA records the result. It doesn't record the reason. And the difference between a trade mission and a raid can be invisible in the genome 8 centuries later. And there is another complication. The European colonial period introduced massive genetic disruption across the Pacific. Between the 18th and 19th centuries, Rapa Nui lost over 90% of its population to slave raids, disease, and forced deportation. Modern Rapa Nui genomes carry significant European ancestry that complicates any attempt to isolate the pre-Columbian signal. Separating ancient Native American admixture from colonial era, mixing requires sophisticated computational methods. The Stanford team used local ancestry inference algorithms that could distinguish Native American tracts from European ones based on tract length decay patterns. Older admixture produces shorter, more fragmented tracts. Recent admixture leaves longer, unbroken segments. The results were clear. The Native American segments were significantly shorter and more decayed than the European ones, placing the mixing event centuries earlier. So, where does that leave the Kon-Tiki hypothesis? Heyerdahl was right that there was contact. He was wrong about almost everything else. The direction was reversed, the scale was smaller, and the people who made the voyage were the greatest open ocean navigators in human history, not South American rafters. The Kon-Tiki was a raft. Polynesian voyaging canoes were engineered vessels capable of sailing into the wind, tacking across trade wind patterns, and carrying provisions for weeks at sea. The difference in technology wasn't marginal. It was the difference between drifting and navigating, between hoping to arrive and choosing a destination. Polynesian navigators crossed over 12,000 miles of open ocean using star paths, wave patterns, and bird migration routes. No compass, no charts, no metal. Their navigation system was so precise that modern recreations have successfully replicated ancient voyage routes using only traditional methods. The Hokulea, a reconstruction of a traditional Hawaiian voyaging canoe, has sailed over 150,000 nautical miles since 1976 using celestial navigation. The genomic evidence now suggests their network extended even further than anyone assumed, reaching the continental Americas and leaving a genetic signature that survived 8 centuries of subsequent history. But if the contact happened on the South American coast, who exactly did the Polynesians meet? The Zenu occupied the Sinu River Valley in northern Colombia for over 2,000 years. Their civilization peaked between around 200 and 1600 CE. They engineered one of the largest hydraulic systems in pre-Columbian South America, with canals stretching across 500,000 hectares of floodplain. Their trade networks connected the Pacific and Caribbean coasts. If any South American population was positioned to encounter ocean-going Polynesian voyagers, it was the Zenu. They navigated by river the same way Polynesians navigated by star. 2 seafaring cultures, separated by an ocean, converging on the same stretch of coast. The Stanford analysis found that when they tested which indigenous American population was the closest genetic match to the Native American tracks in Polynesian genomes, the Zenu came out on top. But one contact event doesn't mean one story. The question of what happened during that meeting remains entirely open. Did the Polynesians stay? Did they bring Zenu individuals back with them? Or did both parties simply exchange materials, including sweet potato tubers, and part ways? The sweet potato offers a clue. Its presence across Polynesia suggests not just contact but deliberate agricultural transfer. Someone understood the plant's value, propagated it, and carried it thousands of miles across the open Pacific. And linguists have long noted the similarity between the Polynesian word kumara and the Quechua word kumar for sweet potato. That parallel predates any European contact with either population. One word shared across 12,000 miles of open water, too specific to be coincidence, too old to be colonial contamination. Someone carried this plant across the Pacific, planted it in foreign soil, and taught others how to grow it. That is not an accident. That is agriculture shared between peoples. But the most compelling evidence may still be underground. Ancient DNA from pre-contact burials on the Marquesas and Rapa Nui could confirm the admixture date independently. Several teams are now attempting exactly that. If ancient skeletal DNA from 1200 CE shows the same Native American tracks, the case becomes almost impossible to dispute. The petrous bone, the densest bone in the human skull, preserves ancient DNA better than any other skeletal element. It is the key to unlocking 800-year-old genomes. So what does this change about the story we tell? About first contact. Columbus crossed the Atlantic in 1492, but Polynesian navigators may have already crossed the Pacific and made contact with South America nearly 3 centuries earlier, and the Norse reached Newfoundland around 1000 CE. The idea that Europeans were uniquely capable of oceanic exploration isn't just incomplete. It is contradicted by the evidence. The DNA doesn't just prove contact, it reframes who was capable of what. The Pacific wasn't a barrier. For the right navigators, it was a highway. Before 1492, the oceans were already highways. Multiple civilizations had already crossed them. Columbus was simply the last to arrive and the first to write it down in a language Europe could read. And there may be more contact events still hidden in the genomes of Pacific populations. Every island chain, every ancient burial, every unsequenced skeleton is a potential case file waiting to be opened. Polynesian civilization built the largest maritime network in the ancient world, spanning millions of square miles of open ocean. Their DNA legacy now proves the network reached further than anyone imagined, and there is still more to find. Ancient DNA studies from pre-contact Polynesian burials are underway across the Marquesas, the Tuamotu archipelago, and Rapa Nui itself. If those genomes confirm what the modern DNA suggests, the pre-Columbian contact hypothesis moves from probable to definitive. But here's the question DNA still can't answer. If Polynesians reached South America around 1200 CE, what stopped them from going further? Did they explore the coastline? Did they enter the river systems? Did they meet other civilizations further south or north? The genome holds a record of one encounter, but one encounter is rarely the whole story. Dozens of island populations in eastern Polynesia have never been sampled for ancient DNA. Each one could confirm the timeline, extend it, or complicate it further. Columbus didn't discover the Americas, he arrived late, and the DNA from a volcanic island in the middle of the Pacific just proved it. If you followed the evidence this far, consider subscribing. Every video in this series follows DNA into the places textbooks never go. The sources for this video are linked in the description below, and the next case is already open, because when it comes to who reached where first, the ocean remembers what the history books forgot.